Hey guys, welcome back to more homeowner association stories. In this video, a ridiculous HOA built 31 houses on my property unaware that I inherited the entire land. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the video. So, a little bit of background on me and my family to start. I, 33 female, grew up in a more rural neighborhood with my parents. I was an only child. My parents owned a few acres of farmland around their house, along with another large plot of land, roughly 150 acres a few miles away. My dad had grown up on a farm and used the land around their house for farming vegetables and fruit. The larger piece of land my parents owned was on the outskirts of the nearest city and had been undeveloped for a year before the events of this story began. I don't remember the exact details of the land agreement, but my dad had won it at an auction. I'd been under the impression that the land was going to be sold off and give my parents a nice chunk of change they'd be able to use for retirement. When I started college, my parents sat me down and told me that they wanted me to actually inherit the land once they passed away. I was a bit taken aback since I had not shown interest in becoming a farmer or knew much about land development outside of what my parents taught me. My dad explained that because there was potential in where the land was located, there was a good chance that the price would go way up as the years went on and it was not being developed. My parents knew that I had goals and ambitions of my own, so they told me that I would receive the land once I turned 30 as part of an inheritance deal they worked out with a lawyer. Until then, the land would be in their name. So I went to school, worked through a double major of English and elementary education, took summer courses to spread out the credits so that I wasn't overworking each semester. I fell in love with teaching during my student teaching semester. I'd heard about people dropping out of the program before finishing it or dropping their education major entirely to spend a few more semesters graduating with a completely different degree. I did not have that and I felt I'd found my calling in life. I enjoyed the time and effort I put into teaching the class I was placed in and had fun coming up with lesson plans that catered to different ways of learning. Graduation was coming up, so I started putting out feelers to see if I'd be able to find a school to work in before the next school year began. The principal at the primary school I taught at reached out and asked if I could speak with him about an opportunity. He was working out details with a few other teachers at the school, so he was not able to tell me much before I met with him. What I didn't expect for him to ask me was if I wanted to take part in an English language program overseas that had other previous student teachers from his school living in a foreign country while teaching children English. The program would require me to live in Japan for the entirety of my tenure, so it would be a 5-year commitment. The flight along with an apartment would be paid for by the program. I would get a salary that was on par with the amount I'd get if I taught in the US. I did not need to be fluent in Japanese and would learn the language as I went through my day-to-day routine. It felt like a no-brainer to say yes to this program. My parents were ecstatic when I told them and helped me get ready for the trip. I don't want to go into my whole experience in Japan, don't want to get too off track, but by the time I came back to the States I wondered if I'd be able to have another chance to go back. My parents took me back to their home while I started searching for a place to live on my own. 2 months after I got back from Japan, my parents got in their car one evening to go grocery shopping. A drunk driver drifted into their lane and hit their car head-on, killing them on impact. Everything happened too quickly after that. They both had plans and wills in place if something were to happen to them, and their lawyer had all the details regarding how their funerals were to be carried out. I felt like I was just standing outside of where everything was happening, watching people coming up to me in the store and around town to express their condolences. It didn't feel real, especially after being gone from home for so long, only to have both of the people I loved the most taken away from me. I was 26 when they passed, so the only thing I was able to claim for myself was their house. At the time I didn't want to even stay the night, everything was too raw, so when the same principal reached out to me again about another 5 years overseas, I accepted without hesitation. I spent the next 5 years putting distance between myself and my family home, focusing on work and grieving in a completely different country. While I was away, an HOA company was looking for land to develop into a community right outside of the city. Instead of doing the responsible and legal thing when checking out large unused plots of land, they found the land my parents owned and thought it was abandoned. I don't know what channels they looked into exactly, but due to the fact that I was out of the country and my parents' inheritance was still in limbo, until I returned to the States to claim it when I turned 30, the land was not listed under ownership of a particular person upon their death. The HOA took this to mean that they could just scoop up my property and do what they wanted with it. And that's exactly what they did. I got back from Japan and returned to my parents' house. I'd made sure that the house was taken care of while I was away, but it wasn't until my return that I felt the need to walk around it. It didn't hurt to be where I grew up after years of being away. Since I was back, I knew I could speak to my parents' lawyer about the inheritance and gathered up some paperwork when I made an appointment. My parents' lawyer was very kind, asking how my time was overseas, and then we got to business. He asked if I wanted to take a drive over to the land to see its potential, and I agreed. One of the stipulations of the inheritance was that I was not to know the exact location of the 150 acres. My parents wanted to surprise me, so I followed the lawyer in my car to where the land was. I was a bit surprised to see a lot more development in the area, but I figured 5 years was a long enough time for the city to expand outwards and new neighborhoods to pop up. Well, when we got to the edge of the property, I think we were both confused. Instead of the large fields I was expecting, the entirety of the 150 acres was taken up by a neighborhood. A very swanky neighborhood that boasted large homes with garages and large lawns. My lawyer drove around the entire area, confirming that all of the land that had been a part of my inheritance was affected. I could see that the neighborhood was fully developed with a collection of roadways along with the homes, and the hope my parents had for investing in my future shattered. Someone had already utilized my land and was making money off of it. I honestly didn't know what to think here, and I felt like I'd lost a part of my parents all over again. Even if I was gonna sell the land to someone else, the fact that I hadn't been able to oversee anything regarding its sale or development felt like a gut punch. My parents' lawyer first apologized to me. I have no clue what expression I was making, but I'd never seen someone look at me with so much pity. He told me that he'd look into this situation as soon as he got back to his office, and I just nodded and went back to my car. I drove back to my parents' house and slept there. I couldn't even begin to imagine what had happened to that land that I'd been promised, that had it paved over and populated like this. The next day, my parents' lawyer informed me that he had not been notified about anyone seeking ownership of the land before I inherited it. There was no email or letter or any correspondence, so that meant the land had been seized illegally. I asked what that meant, if there was any way to reclaim it, even though it had already been developed, whoever or whatever company owned it. My parents' lawyer told me about a colleague of theirs that worked with real estate claims that I could speak to. He would still handle my inheritance and be there to answer any questions I had on that part, but his colleague was better suited for the situation. So then I met with another lawyer, Trish. She was more than ready to fight for me to get my land back after what my parents' lawyer told her. The first step before anything could be done was to figure out exactly what had happened between the 5 years between my parents' death and my return home from Japan. How had the land been developed without me or my parents' express permission? Who ordered the development? Since there were houses on the land, were there people living there? Trish told me that she would find out what had happened and I should just let her work. 2 weeks later, I got my answers. Trish was able to determine that due to the delay in my inheritance, the land had not been properly verified for ownership by the HOA company that decided to use it. The auction company that my father had gotten the land from still had their old records, so that was what the HOA used in order to justify that they could use the land, since it had been won in auction and the person who owned it was now deceased, but the trail stopped there. It technically didn't, since there was still the information in my inheritance agreement, but the HOA didn't seem to want to dig for that. There was most likely yet another paper trail that would take longer to find that showed exactly where in the process the HOA ignored ownership rights, but the initial investigation was enough for Trish already to ask me if I wanted to build a case. I asked if there was a way I could speak to someone from the HOA's board or ETL. A part of me hoped that once I explained the situation and showed them proof that I was the actual owner of the property, maybe there was some sort of deal we could come up with. I don't know if I was just being naive or just hoping to have things settled without having to go to court, but that sort of thing only seems to happen in movies. Trish was able to get in touch with someone from the board of directors at the HOA company via email, but I figured it was enough, and when I presented my evidence to them, I was hoping for at least a request to meet in person so that we could talk about what went on. Instead, I received a very angry email claiming I was attempting to sabotage their latest development. When I told them the land never belonged to them in the first place, they came back with a claim of adverse possession. In a nutshell, if someone is trespassing on land continuously for a certain amount of time and remains a constant presence, that land can become theirs under the law if the owners don't challenge them. The HOA board member told me that even if I had information about being the legal owner of the land, because of when the HOA's company first began their presence on the property, it was theirs under the law. They told me that I'd have no standing if I tried to take them to court and I should just pretend that I was never promised any land. I broke down after reading all of that and called Trish to tell her what had happened. She asked me to forward the emails to her and she would take a further look into what was going on here. She called me minutes later and she sounded happy. Trish, I need to make sure of something and I hope you won't be upset with me when I ask. What year did your parents pass away? Me, 5 years ago in 2018. Trish, that company cannot claim adverse possession. In our state, a trespasser needs to have a constant presence on a property for a minimum of 7 years, even if there's a discrepancy with ownership. Me, so that means, Trish, we have a case. If you're willing to get further into this and I think I can make this whole thing work in your favor, even if there's nothing we can do with what's currently built on the property. Me, give me a night to think about it. I got a lot of information thrown at me today. Trish, okay, of course. I will wait for your go-ahead if you want to proceed, okay? I gave myself 3 nights to come to a decision. I'd never been in any legal proceedings before, but I knew that the process could be long and expensive, depending on the case. I weighed my want of being able to take back the land that rightfully belonged to me, or to just let the HOA company keep it so that I didn't have to go through a court case. In the end, I felt like I'd be squandering my parents' gift if I didn't fight for it, so I called Trish back and she set up a meeting to discuss what she had in mind. Trish had come up with an idea while she was researching more about the HOA community that had taken up the land. According to her, there were 31 houses built on the land that were priced currently around 500 to 800k each. The land had been prime for real estate development, and even though it was developed without my knowledge, the HOA had seemed to spare no expense with the construction on the houses. They were built with good materials, and the contracting company the HOA hired was one of the best in the area, so they did not skimp on construction. Trish thought that if we won our case in court, I should keep the current neighborhood and work out a deal with the current owners of the homes. She wanted to work out more of a plan if we were successful in court, but told me to consider keeping the area as it was and reap in the benefits for years to come. I wanted to go through trial first before I thought of the future, and Trish was able to show me the case that she compiled. She was gonna let the HOA know that I was planning to move forward with taking them to court, and told me that she'd be in touch once the HOA's legal team spoke to her. The HOA's team came back quickly and claimed the case would not take too long to close, stating they had proof that the HOA legally purchased the land. Of course, that wasn't what the emails I received said, so I made sure Trish had those when we went in for the first part of the trial. I gotta be honest, I'm not really versed in the court process, barring what I know from the crime shows I watch, but I knew that the prosecution and the defense needed to share all of the investigation and files they had. So then Trish had provided the HOA lawyers with all of the documents from my inheritance, including the copies of the land deal from the auction company. Their legal team provided nothing. Trish brought it up before the other lawyer could even say anything. Trish said, "Your Honor, I would like it to be put on record that while I and my client have been forthcoming with all the evidence of land ownership that is being disputed in this trial, we have not received any evidence from the defendant's legal team regarding this matter." Judge, turning to the other lawyer, "I would hate for that to be true. Is there a reason that the defense has not supplied the prosecution with their evidence? As I see that the evidence is here on my bench already." Lawyer, "It must have been an oversight, Your Honor." Judge, "We will continue this after the prosecution has ample time to review the evidence presented against their clients." Court is adjourned for today, but I expect to hear from the prosecution this evening to determine if we should still be proceeding. So then, we got the evidence, and the only paperwork that was provided by the HOA was the information from the construction company and the contractors. There were no legal documents about the HOA acquiring the property, just the information on what they did to it. Trish would press for more, but if the lawyers didn't have it, then she knew we were guaranteed to win. She informed the judge that she was still willing to proceed with what evidence was provided, and the judge told us to report to the courthouse the next month for the continuation of the trial. I was glad that Trish was keeping me involved in the case and asking my opinion on how I wanted to proceed, so when I got a call from her 2 days before we were supposed to appear in court again to tell me to come down to the courthouse, I was a little nervous. When I got there, the HOA's lawyer and I assume one of the members of the HOA company board were there. The judge was there along with a very scared-looking older gentleman. "Sir, what is your relationship to this case?" Older man: "I'm Jacob Myers, a member of the HOA's finance board." HOA board member: "I can confirm he's one of our members, but the decisions that were made on behalf of the company were done through the board, not through finance." Older man: correct, that was the way it was supposed to be. But I'm not gonna get in trouble for this, am I? The judge said, you told me that you needed to speak in regards to this case as there were other parties at play in the land deal. You're not gonna get in trouble for providing information, so as long as it's the truth. Older man: yes, the finance department was just supposed to approve of the amount of money being utilized for the development, however, it had been brought to our attention that there was no purchase order for the land. When I went to speak with a member of the board, they said they didn't need one because it fell under adverse possession. HOA lawyer: I was made aware of the claim of adverse possession when I'd received the emails that one of the board members sent to the prosecution's client. I'm aware that adverse possession is not viable at 5 years but 7. Older man: see, the board members said that they were working to come up with paperwork that showed they had been on the land for 8 years. I told them their timetable was off based on the other information they gave us and was told not to worry about it. This has been weighing on my mind for a week and I didn't want to just let the trial go on with fake documents. HOA lawyer: I would like to speak with my client alone, please. So yeah, apparently someone on the HOA board was trying to come up with fake documents they could use to indicate they were on the land longer than they originally claimed to be. That was also the reason why the HOA's lawyer did not have all of the documentation to give to Trish right away. The next few weeks consisted of deliberations as to how we wanted to proceed. The HOA company was really trying to get their way out of going into court, but what they gave Trish for settlement wasn't something I was satisfied with. I would have loved to have the company connected to a court case so that anyone who bought homes under their company would be able to see that they were not to be trusted. Another part of me couldn't help but feel sorry for the homeowners that were on my land already. I did not want to evict them for something they had nothing to do with. I then expressed my concerns to Trish and hated that not only were the deliberations keeping me in limbo as to what to do with the land, it was also keeping the homeowners in limbo. The HOA company had disclosed a little bit of info regarding the trial to the people that were living on my land, and more than a few of the homeowners threatened their own lawsuits if there was going to be some sort of eviction process or purchase issues. A few more months had passed without a way to proceed, and Trish told me she had worked out more of the plan she had back when the trial was first set to start, so we met with the HOA lawyer and presented the HOA company with a way to make sure homeowners remained happy. I would legally recognize the home sales on my property, but the homeowners would need to pay a fair land lease to me instead of whatever dues they owed the HOA. The HOA would then relinquish all ownership of the land as they legally didn't own it and would pay a flat settlement fee for developing the land without my permission or input. I would work with the homeowners on things they would want in the development and let them know of any changes that I wanted to make on the land, but in the end I would have the final say. The HOA agreed to the terms after 2 weeks of silence. I worked with Trish and an insurance company to come up with a fair lease for the people in the development. I sent letters out and went door to door to introduce myself to each of the homeowners and explain the situation. Most of the owners were happy that they were not gonna lose their houses. A few had been planning to move out ever since the HOA told them about the court issues, but they were happy that things were settled now and there weren't any implications on them for any monetary settlements. I went through the insurance company as well to come up with a fair settlement for the HOA to pay me for the illegal development. I cannot give the full amount here, but it was enough that I never have to teach again. The amount I'm receiving monthly from the leases on the home is passive income that I'm able to utilize for improving the land the houses are on or working on other parts of the development. The last thing I heard about the HOA company was that it doesn't exist anymore as of this year. The amount of money I got from them was a huge hit to their finances and I don't think they were able to properly recover. That, and from some of the rumors floating around, they had done some other shady land deals that were coming to light. So where does that leave me now? Well, I'm still teaching, mostly working substitute positions since it's hard to find a permanent position in the district I live in, simply because it's fun. I still enjoy every opportunity I have to teach, but if I have weeks or even months when I'm not able to, I don't have to worry about my finances. It is freeing and reminds me of when I was in Japan. There were a few things I had to worry about while the rest was taken care of by the company. It's like that now, but it's all me this time. Being a landowner and having a development that I maintain is far different than what I thought I'd be doing by the time I turned 33, but I'm enjoying this new part of my life as well. And the next one is a funny story from r/malicious compliance. It is titled "Video Attendance is Required." So for me, we are still mostly remote at work with more and more of the coordination done over chat. Meetings are mostly audio and shared screen. And by the way, ripe stars, let me know in the comments, do you still work from home? And if so, do you enjoy it? I gotta say, working from home is one of the best things ever, let me tell you. Either way, one unpopular program manager has begun to make it a point to ask everyone to turn cameras on for so-called better communication. He called me out today, and I discovered a lovely bit of malicious compliance that is possible. I turned my camera on, and we immediately discovered why TV announcers dress simply. So I was wearing a golf polo with fine horizontal stripes. Every time I moved, a more pattern danced across the screen. It was the most obnoxious, attention-grabbing thing I've ever heard. Cue 5 minutes of razzing me about my shirt. I spent the rest of the meeting fidgeting in my chair. I cannot wait for next week's meeting. I have several more shirts with similar patterns. And by the way guys, if you've watched until here, please let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.